We are go for liftoff in T-minus 30.
It's the Weiliotis podcast.
I like it.
Okay, welcome everybody to the first official episode of the Weiliotis podcast. So here, this is where my co-host and I kind of talk about a particular movie or a director's filmography, and we kind of break down its various facets and, just generally share our love for the motion picture. So today we'll be talking about Drew Goddard's 2012 cult hit, The Cabin in the Woods. And here with me, as always, is my great friend and writing partner, Mikey Weil.
Hi there. Very excited to be here. This is really cool. I guess I'll kind of go over my brief history of podcasts. Kind of started off that way. I didn't understand podcasts for a very long time. I was kind of like, why do people want to just listen to people talk? It's kind of taking it back to the days of the radio, and that's all they had. Now we have 3D and IMAX and video games that play like movies. I thought it was very weird that people were so into just hearing two people talk. And then, I think you just have to find what podcasts work for you, and then you become obsessed. So I started listening to podcasts of comedians interviewing other comedians. I started listening to podcasts of, conspiracy theories, ghosts, aliens. That's the stuff I'm into. There's so much out there. And it's actually interesting. When I was really doing a lot of stand-up comedy back in New Hampshire, I was living in Massachusetts, and I would drive about an hour to New Hampshire, once or twice a week to do a 5-minute set. And then I would drive back. And I'm not a good nighttime driver. Like, I can't drive at night, can't see that well. And like air conditioning puts me to sleep, heat puts me to sleep. So I just kind of had a tough time staying awake. So I'd like chain smoke cigars or like chew sunflower seeds, listen to screamo music. And then I started something on a SoundCloud account called Staying Awake with Mikey Weil. And it was basically, I would just talk to myself about the drive to the show, the comics I met or caught up with. And then I would kind of just, talk about how the set went and what I think about the comedy scene in general. And then I would drive, just record myself driving back. So like, I didn't really know what podcasts were, but I had like kind of created a podcast at that time. But yeah, it's really cool.
Great idea.
I've been a guest on my friend's podcast twice, Discussion Combustion. And then I was on another friend's kind of online live kind of podcast show as well, which was really cool. And I was just like, hey, I hate hearing my voice, but maybe other people will be interested in the topics that we kind of have. I think kind of why I wanted to talk about Cabin in the Woods today, and kind of do that as our first episode is like, I'm so obsessed with film, TV, music. It's very hard, and it takes a very long time for me to change my favorite movie, my favorite band, my favorite TV show. Like for forever, favorite movie was Big Fish, favorite TV show is Scrubs, favorite band, that's changed a few times. It was Bon Iver for so long, the 1975. I was listening to The Head and the Heart in the shower recently. I've seen a bunch, and it just like clicked like, hey, 1975, I still love, but I think I like The Head and the Heart more. So for me, Big Fish was my favorite movie forever. I watched Interstellar a few times a few years back, just like 2 nights in a row. And I was like, I think this might be it. And then recently I just went down like a internet wormhole, just obsessed with Cabin in the Woods. I hadn't even watched it recently until we talked about this podcast. But I was just like thinking about it. I was Googling it, reading about the whiteboard scene, which we're of course going to cover. And I was like, oh man, I grew up on horror. My mom raised me and my sister on ghosts and vampires, aliens, Twilight Zone. And I just think Cabin in the Woods is the best horror movie out there. The best kind of like, if you were a horror fan, this is the movie everybody should watch. I have a friend and him and his girlfriend are just getting into horror movies. And I suggested this. And then I was like, hey, I think this has got to be the first thing we talk about, which got us to rewatch the movie, listen to the commentary, and just revisit such a cool movie.
Yeah. No, I mean, it's a great movie, and it's cool that you're showing your friends who are kind of just starting to get into horror movies, because I think, yeah, this is a great one, because in a lot of sense, it does have scenes that are actually kind of terrifying, but at the same time, it has kind of a light tone to it. There are plenty of comedic elements to it, and obviously, what's kind of really brilliant about it is that it does kind of break down these traditional like tropes in horror movies and kind of turns it on its head, and like even explains why they're kind of there in the first place. But yeah, I'm glad that for our first episode, we're talking about a movie that we both kind of have a little bit of a history with, where, I remember when I first saw this, like I knew nothing about it really. Like I didn't, it was funny because I saw a trailer. I remember seeing the trailers back in the day, and I was like, all right, this looks literally like the most basic horror movie. Like
it's called The Cabin in the Woods.
Yeah, The Cabin in the Woods. You have college kids that just go to a cabin just for a weekend, and like bad things happen. Like, we've heard that multiple times. There's Cabin Fever, there's Evil Dead, there's Friday the 13th. There's multiple movies that, obviously this took inspiration from, and even this was even before I really like had an understanding of who both Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon were. So I didn't really understand like their relation to like this movie, like what they were actually doing with it. So when I saw it, I was just kind of like, wow, this is it. This is like the horror movie for fans. But yeah, it's a good first one to talk about for sure. And, Mikey kind of went into a little bit about his relationship to podcasts. And, it's funny because like for the past couple of years, I'd probably say since like 2017, I've been really starting to listen to more. And yeah, I mean, it is kind of fascinating how it like you said, you kind of related it to that of the radio, where it's kind of coming back. It's kind of fun to just listen to one person or a couple of people talk about a topic. And yeah, I think just because of how easy it is to play whenever, when you're driving home, when you're cooking and whenever, like it's just kind of a little easier to consume than other forms of media, and still get a lot of enjoyment and get a lot of information out of it. But yeah, no, I mean, and I think here with the Weiliotis podcast, we obviously it's mainly on film. Like we want to talk about movies, and really any movie. Like we're even before this podcast, we were kind of discussing like what every movie would be each week. So like, and it could be anything, new, old, heavy genre based or art house or commercial, like
trilogies.
It could be anything,
we could do trilogies, prequels and sequels.
Yeah.
And yeah, like you said, October we could do Halloween, and we could do the Halloween, franchise and the new ones versus the old ones. There's so much we can do about this. And, Tom and I are still those few people left who go to movie theaters. Of course, movie theaters aren't open now, but we still go to movie theaters. We spend a lot of money to go to IMAX and 3D movies. So, we're big movie buffs in that sense. And I think another kind of brief history about myself is, I kind of trailed off from following sports when I was in 8th grade, and then just got into music and film. And it's always funny to me when I'll say, oh, Danny Boyle and Darren Aronofsky, are two of the best directors, and I like seeing them head to head at the Oscars. And I have a friend who's like, who and what? Like, how do you know the name of directors? And I'm like, you can tell me every Red Sox player since like 19 whatever when they started, but I named 2 directors, and that's kind of like crazy. So I think this podcast is really for those people out there who are just film nerds, and you still might love sports and you love it, a bunch of different things, but this is kind of for that. We're going to go over a lot of things. We're going to go over some budget filming locations of movies, maybe reception of movies. We're going to cover, a lot of those things and just kind of nerd out. And yeah, that's kind of what
I would say. This is a podcast where in the realm of movies, like we want to kind of discuss everything. Like we don't want to leave anything out. So obviously I think the bulk of it, we really just want to break down the movie itself, why it works, maybe why certain aspects don't work. But yeah, like Mikey said, go into the actual history of the production, like why was this made in the first place? Like, I mean, this movie has an interesting pre-production history. So like, I think we'll maybe talk about that for a little bit, but yeah, leave nothing off the table. But at the end of the day, like it's just two people that really kind of have a passion for movies and kind of want to share that with the world, and hopefully find other people that are the same, and want to share their passion. And, we would love to hear back from you, whether it's on any kind of a platform you find this on, whether you're just listening to the audio or watching this on YouTube. And unfortunately, it's probably because of my computer, but the video itself might be a little laggy. So I apologize for kind of early kind of inconveniences on that part, but, we'll improve over time. Humble beginnings,
A lot of people will be listening to this just audio, too. They might be at work and pull up the YouTube video and minimize it. So yeah, I'm in the middle of moving right now across the country back to the East Coast. So my apartment's a mess. I'm working with what I have. And yeah, we're going to get better as we go. We're going to create some social media accounts soon. We're going to host this on my entertainment website, driftmouse.com. So we're going to have its own page on there. I'm learning Photoshop. I'm nowhere near Tom, but I'm going to make some fun promo pictures that are not at all related to the podcast and won't be the front image for it, but I'll use that for my social media to kind of tease a few things. And yeah, we're just going to keep working on it. We really wanted to start off doing video because it's so easy these days to do video. We didn't want to do audio for the first year and save up for a $10,000, camera, webcam.
Well, camera, and also to record like this, you definitely need like I have a good computer, but my CPU isn't like quite there. Same with like the amount of RAM I have. So like that's why the video in this case and maybe the next couple might be a little on the laggy side. But hey, like we want to kind of come out the gate like with as much additional content as we could, and just kind of get us in the rhythm of it. So when we do get better equipment, we'll kind of already know what we're doing to an extent. So in
case anybody was wondering, that's one of my dogs there. That's Jaeger, our pug. He's a pug Japanese chin. So there he is. So yeah, I think another kind of disclaimer that we definitely would like to put out there, as far as a disclaimer that I think is pretty important for our podcast is Weiliotis is the name of our podcast. We just kind of put our two last names together. It's hard to come up with the name of a podcast these days. Like we couldn't have really done like Talkin' Film or like Cinematic Convos because like everything is taken, whether it's a band name or a podcast name. So we put our two names together, Weil and Veliotis, Mikey Weil, Tom Veliotis. We came up with the Weiliotis podcast. And we do just want to come out and say it up front that this has nothing to do with Ray Liotta. It just sounds like it does. But this is not a Ray Liotta fan club by any means, but hey, we will probably cover one of his movies at some point because he's a great actor. And so
I think it'd be wrong of us to never talk about Goodfellas on this podcast. So that will come eventually, whenever that is. But
I just started watching The Sopranos, and I grew up like my mom's dad showed me Godfather 1, 2, 3, Goodfellas, Casino, all those growing up, and I haven't really watched them since I was a kid, and I'd like to revisit them. I saw The Irishman last year, early this year. So I'd like to, kind of revisit all these because even no matter what movie it is, like Little Rascals, one of my favorites I've been thinking about lately. You watch it as a kid and then you grow up and watch it as an adult and you're like, there was so much inappropriate humor in here or adult jokes I missed as a kid. And of course that would ring true with the, mob movies. There's so much more to pick up on.
That's another kind of facet I want to bring out about this podcast is I want this to be kind of a good reason for us to like revisit movies we haven't seen in a while or see new ones. Again, hopefully we can get feedback from people, recommendations of stuff we haven't seen. I want to utilize this platform to expand my taste and see more, really, because that's what I'm trying to do in general. And I know this podcast will help us do that. So I think Tom and I also, they say opposites attract, which I think is totally true. We both studied film in college. We can talk a little bit more about, our film interests and expertise. But yeah, for me, like come every Oscar season, I either love an Oscar movie or I hate it. There's really no in between for me at Oscar movies. So like some I just won't even bother watching because I don't have an interest in it. One year I'd like to go to the theaters, watch every Oscar, foreign, short, animated, everything. But yeah, I mean, I'm a person who doesn't love all of the classics. I'm a person who would rather watch Sharknado 7 than watch, the black and white kind of Oscar nominated feature film of the year. So that's something I think will be interesting on this podcast is we'll challenge each other. We'll challenge ourselves. We'll revisit films that we didn't like 10 years ago, and maybe they'll be a little bit different now. And of course, Oscar season will be very exciting for us on this podcast because there's a lot to nerd out about. It's usually the same directors, the same actors, at the Oscars as a few years ago. They kind of take a few years off, make something else, it goes right to the Oscars. And, I think that there's a lot of people to really
follow and root for come Oscar season. We're going to know a lot of history with these people. So yeah. And like Tom said, we definitely would like to have guests on at some point. I mean, we have friends who are in the business in one way or another. And we would love to have people on just to talk movies or talk about being in movies. So my background is like, as far as entertainment goes, I do stand-up comedy. I play a little bit of music, just more as a hobby. And then I really like writing screenplays. I like making shorts and sketch videos. And that's how Tom and I actually reconnected. So brief history. I was friends with Tom's sister in college. She had told me, hey, my brother's going to be studying film soon. You should connect with him. We were friends on Facebook for like 10 years. Last year, I shared a news article on Facebook. We won't tell you everything about it because we want to kind of keep it secretive for now. Tom said we should write this. And then a half a year passed. I think I shared it again. And he was like, hey, let's write this. And I was like, cool. I hadn't written in 6 years, like a screenplay. You know, I'd written 2 feature-length screenplays before I moved out here to Colorado and life got busy. And I love writing screenplays. It's such a cool way to get lost in a different world and immerse yourself in it. And it's such a trippy experience. So we are writing, we're on the second half of a third act of a horror comedy movie, kind of like Cabin in the Woods, only in the sense that it's horror comedy. And it takes place in Florida and it's a monster kind of movie. And once we're done, we're going to try to shop it out there. And then, yeah, graduating from college, really hard to find a job in film. My mom told me to switch majors the whole time. I graduated. I'd done internships where like I worked at TV stations, marketing firms. And like for me, I really just wanted to be a screenplay writer or an actor or director. Those things are very hard without connection. So I've been working recruiting pretty much since college and then out of college. And then I write and make sketch videos and do what I can on the weekends because I want to try to get my name out there. And Tom's a litlittle more immersed in the scene than I am. He can tell you all about that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I have been for the past almost 2 years now fully, but, you know, I was born and raised in New England, up in Massachusetts, and ever since August of 2018, I've been living down in Atlanta, and I've been here ever since, almost 2 full years now. And I came down here specifically for the industry because it's booming. I mean, obviously everything's on hold right now, but at the time it was booming, and it was pretty much almost the same level with LA. Plenty of productions out here. Obviously Netflix, Marvel, Disney, a bunch of huge production companies come out here and make movies. And I've mainly been doing security. So I've been a security supervisor for a while now, working on sets, both television and film. And it's been amazing because I've already met a lot of people in multiple departments, and I've just been not all the time, but I've been up close sometimes to the set, and it's amazing just to have that opportunity in the first place. But yeah, you know, like it's cool. Like, and obviously again, it sucks because everything is on hold right now, but hopefully in the near future I can get back to it. And, you know, like Mikey was saying, it's, you know, us writing too was a great thing for both of us, just because like he said, he hadn't read anything in a couple years, and same goes for me, where I was writing a lot in college and then I kind of wasn't writing as much afterwards. But then this idea that we had from an article we found kind of reignited that passion to write. So we've been writing, and then this podcast, the idea of this kind of came out of that too. And we have many other projects potentially we want to get going. So it's been cool. It's been a good couple of months so far, at least creatively trying to work on this stuff. But
we have any connections from sci-fi listening to this, please let us know, because like we tell people we're writing a movie for sci-fi, not like sci-fi commissioned us to write it. More like there's no other avenue that could really like pick up this movie except for sci-fi. And for me, like I said, I love Sharknado, Mega Shark vs. Crocosaurus. Like every summer I watch the Twilight Zone series marathon that I think used to be on Sci-Fi and isn't anymore. And then every year I'll go up to Maine and my uncle and I would always watch like the marathon of all of the Lavalantulas, all of those kind of movies. And I've always said since like day one, like if a huge director came to me and was like, I want you to be in this World War II biopic, I want you as the main character, it's already getting Oscar buzz, I just wrapped the script, we're going to start filming in like Europe, beautiful Europe, and I'd be like, cool, I'm on, let's do it. But then if somebody else was like, hey, I'm working on this movie, it's called Shark Crabnado, and it's about a shark crab hybrid tornado, and it's coming to Sci-Fi, you'll get paid $1,000 to star in it, I'd be like, yeah, I'm going to choose this. I'm going to choose this. I'm going to film this movie. Cause I love campy. Yeah. I love campy movies. There's just so much fun to them and heart to them. And, the one we're writing is interesting. It pays homage to a lot of like our favorite TV shows. We're trying to tie it into a couple other universes unintentionally. And I think it's kind of smart. It's got one kind of thing that is very true. One of the main screenplay kind of tips and tricks. They say, 1, show, don't tell. Don't just say something, show it happening. 2, write what you know. Write something about you and your friends or where you grew up, because it's easier to write that way. And then 3, they say, if you're going to set something up, make sure you come back to it. That's what, Drew Goddard and Joss Whedon talked about in the commentary of this. And that's such an important role in screenplay writing, is to definitely make sure you do that. And there's a lot of that in Cabin in the Woods, especially with the merman.
Yeah, I think it's, what's it called? Chekhov's gun. That's like the kind of like literary term. So yeah, you bring in obviously like something, and you don't want to make it irrelevant, or, you want to bring it back and have it actually pay off in the end. So you're right. And Cabin does have a lot of that, in many interesting ways. But yeah, Mikey, before we actually get into the real discussion on Cabin, one thing we want to do as well on the podcast before we start every episode, we want to, give a little introduction or give our kind of thoughts on like recent movies we watched, other than obviously the one we're talking about. So if you want to head into that, Mike, any movies you have watched recently that you liked, disliked? What do you think?
Sure. King of Staten Island.
Oh yeah, I got to see that one still.
Yeah, it's Pete Davidson's new movie, directed by Judd Apatow, written by Pete and his writing partner. It's great. I mean, if you're a stand-up comedian fan, there's a lot of comedians who pop up in it in small parts, big parts. Bill Burr co-stars in it. It's really great. Really, really great. Yeah, I thought it was I wouldn't say it's my favorite movie, but I would say it's one of the better movies I've seen this year, and an almost perfect movie where there wasn't a lot to say against it. I mean, it's indie, it's dry, it's slow. And if you followed Pete Davidson from SNL, his stand-up, this is really like his break into the film industry, starring in a movie. He's had a couple smaller parts in some kind of Netflix comedies and other movies and shows, but this was just like, it tells you a lot about who he is as a person, and you learn a lot more through his character, because his character in the movie is very related to who he is in real life. Marissa Tomei is in it. Bill Burr, I think I don't know how to pronounce it.
Bill Burr has a pretty significant role in it too, right?
Yeah, he's the co-star in it. Moises Arias, I don't know if I'm saying that correctly. He's originally from Hannah Montana. He played Rico, and now he's just like the biggest indie actor out there. He was in, I think it's called The Kings of Summer. He's just like an amazing indie actor. And whereas I saw him in this movie, I got excited because any indie movie he's in is really good. So I'd recommend that. I think when we rented it, it was like one of those, that's the kind of weird limbo of like movie theaters not being open right now, is like, if you want to see a brand new movie, you're going to pay $20 for it, because the movie still needs to make back its budget. And, it's the same price pretty much if you're sitting there with your roommate or significant other. And then the other one I would recommend, horror. If you're listening to this, maybe you're a horror fan. This episode, I See You, is the new Helen Hunt movie, and it is just I don't know how to explain it. It's kind of like Cabin in the Woods, where you're like, I'll explain the first half of the synopsis, where it's like basically this woman, her husband who's a cop, and their son, they're getting kind of haunted by somebody in this house, and they don't know who it is. And that's the trailer that you see. And then there's a lot of twists and turns. There's a lot of realistic scariness to it, where it's like, oh man, a lot of the things that are happening could be happening in real life, could be happening at any time. And I can't explain. It's just fantastic. The twist, up to the very last scene, it's great. And my wife can call anything from the beginning of a movie. I'll try to show her something. I'm like waiting for the big payoff at the end to surprise her. And in the first 5 minutes, she already knows the end. She didn't even know this. So I just highly, highly recommend it. I See You. And yeah, what about you? What have you been watching?
Well, first off, nice. I'll have to check both those out. But two movies I had written down here that I watched in the past week. Both one older, one fairly new. The older one is True Stories, directed by David Byrne from Talking Heads. You know? And yeah, it's funny. My roommate just got it on Criterion. I don't know if it's a new Criterion. I don't know when they put it out, but it really fast. I literally never knew about this movie, but it's amazing. It's kind of has, in a way, that has like a mockumentary style where David Burns is addressing the audience and he's talking about this fictionalized town in Texas during like this pageant that's going on in this concert, and it almost has like a Nashville vibe to it. It's like like really slow, small, kind of isolated Texas town, like a lot of quirky antics. You have John Goodman's in it, and he's just literally just like searching for love. Like that's his story. Like he's just trying to find a partner, and it kind of like pokes fun at like consumerism, and obviously has a slew of Talking Heads music, but really, really good. Like a really fun watch. And obviously I love the Talking Heads. So like anything with the Talking Heads and any music of theirs, I'll enjoy. So that's a good one. I would definitely recommend checking that out. And then also a newer movie, The Assistant, directed by Kitty Green and starring Julia Gardner from Ozark. Really, really good. It's funny, as I was watching, I was like, this is kind of a drag in a way, not just because it's slow, but also because it's really depressing. You follow an assistant who works at a production office pretty much during the first like 24 hours of the day. The whole movie takes place in the course of like one full day, and you watch as basically she's kind of slowly sucked into this like corporate this corporate world that, you know, obviously doesn't really give too much back or doesn't really cater to people all that much. And the big kind of problem in the movie is she thinks there's something happening with her boss, so she tries to go to HR with the problem, but he kind of wipes it off and says like, oh, you know, if you really want to go through with this, you know, we'll do it, but, you know, you're not going to have a career in the industry. So there's this dynamic that is unfortunate that does exist in real life, where I think a lot of times some questionable and if not just outright horrible things are swept under the rug. So, you know, just because these, especially in this industry, it's so big, there's so much money at stake that like that's just going to happen. But a really good movie. It's sound design I want to bring out quickly because it's really fascinating. It's really all just diegetic sound. There's no real score to it, I think, until the end. So it's really just hearing like the printer at the office, people chatting in the background. The sound design is really on point. It kind of makes you really kind of immerses you in this world that the girl inhabits. But fascinating. It'd definitely worth checking out. I think it's on Hulu. That's where I watched it. So if you have a Hulu subscription, I would definitely check it out. And yeah, those are the two movies I've watched recently. So
I need to catch up on Ozarks, first of all. I know there's one more season coming out. I mean, that show is just fantastic. Yes.
It is.
Jason Bateman has been great for a while in serious roles, but that one really and he's been around for decades. I mean, nobody doesn't know him, but it's cool to see him do his more serious acting chops. And I think like nobody knew what the Ozarks were really until that came out. And now everybody has the worst idea of what the Ozarks are. And then David Byrne. So I grew up kind of listening to Talking Heads. My dad used to play them, and you know they didn't last long. And David Byrne kind of has been solo doing his own thing. There is a movie he made called "This Must Be the Place" with Sean Penn. It came out years ago. Have you heard of it? Like it's such an interesting.
I forget who that director is.
It's such an interesting. So basically, here's the plot of the movie. Sean Penn plays not really a washed-up musician, but a very famous musician who is now a hermit. His wife is Frances McDormand, who is one of the best actresses of all time. And basically, he's a hermit. He looks exactly like Robert Smith of The Cure, but the whole movie is done with the Talking Heads soundtrack. So like, I've always kind of wondered, did they want this to be The Cure, but didn't get the go-ahead later? But basically, his father was a Jewish man who was taken away in Nazi Germany, was in a concentration camp and got out and moved to America. And his whole life, he's been trying to track down the Nazis who kidnapped him. And then he winds up dying. And then the kind of like catalyst, the bullet at the start of the kind of movie is Sean Penn now has to take over for where his dad left off to find these people. But David Byrne's in it. It's soundtracked by the Talking Heads. I would highly recommend seeing David Byrne when he comes to town. I live out in Colorado. I've been to a lot of Red Rock shows. The Talking Heads came here a few years ago. I really know 3 or 4 Talking Head songs, but I love them so much. And I don't really know a lot of David Byrne solo music. My friend and I got tickets to go to David Byrne. It was the most we've spent for a Red Rocks ticket. Not even resale. They were just, a little pricier than normal for you're seeing David Byrne, and it was just one of the best shows I've ever seen. Watch him on SNL from I think a year or two ago. It's that exact same band setup, choreography, just like highly recommend it. He's just so weird and so cool, and just
I love him. I love him.
Yeah.
What's it? He didn't direct. I think it was what's his name, Jonathan Demme, who made Silence of the Lambs. He directed Stop Making Sense, that concert movie from like the late 80s. Yes. Amazing. Like that dude is weird, and like he's so like crazy on stage. Like he's amazing. I also like, I know a decent amount of their songs. I remember a couple years ago I tried going through the discography, and like they made some amazing music. And also too, just to quickly comment, that movie you brought up with Sean Penn, This Must Be the Place, is it just a random assortment of their songs, or is it all from that album that song was on? Because I think that album is called I forget what it's called, Native Tongues.
Yeah, I think so.
Yeah. So is it just that album, or is it like a random assortment?
I don't remember. I just, like, if you watch the trailer, there's a scene with David Byrne singing and talking, and like, or like singing one of their songs. So I think it's like not even like soundtrack by the Talking Heads. Like Sean Penn stumbles upon a church or something where David Byrne is singing these songs. Super interesting. And yeah, I mean, I still don't think to this day I've seen Stop Making Sense. Maybe we're gonna have to make that one of these episodes. My dad always recommends it to me. He's like, you have to watch this. You have to watch this movie. It's like the band, when the band did their last kind of farewell and they did that documentary. Like those are two of the biggest musical documentaries in history. So Stop Making Sense has been on my list forever. And there's a really big Talking Heads cover band too. I forgot the exact name, but there's
also Take Shelter, the Rolling Stones documentary. That's also a huge, like, kind of monumental film, and that's also a great one. I think maybe we'll do like a concert series at one point. Like we can even talk about one or two at the same time or something. But yeah we'll have to cover some of those in the future. Absolutely. Anything else? My mom's favorite band, the Rolling Stones. We saw them at Fenway when I was in high school, so I would love to watch anything about them, especially live. And that kind of like, you know, these weren't filmed in IMAX 3D, which sometimes I love it, sometimes I don't. These were filmed back in like the 80s, you know, and like I think that's to watch it as our parents watched them, and to watch it in that kind of older kind of film, I think makes it really cool. Makes you feel like you were there. I mean, like, I know that I feel I was born in the wrong generation, the wrong decade. Like I would have loved Woodstock over Coachella. I would have loved going to see, you know, the Rolling Stones and the you know, play more than DJs and stuff like that. I've seen The Cure out here 2 times, and it's just life-changing. Oh, nice. Yeah, they played for like 3.5 hours one of the times. Cool. So I guess we were gonna say. Oh yeah, I was just gonna say any last minute topics before we get into Cabin in the Woods. I was gonna say some movie news. That's something else we want to kind of talk about. Is I know like one thing I love Googling is like upcoming movies. I love to see things I didn't know about, or sequels or prequels or remakes coming out. So yeah, just a couple things. I think I can speak for both of us when I say we were looking forward to seeing in the new Christopher Nolan movie, Tenet, which stars Robert Pattinson and Denzel Washington's son. They, you know, it's kind of, nobody knows what it's about. The trailer's trippy. It takes place in the future, past, present, rewind, fast forward. It looks like Inception and Interstellar put together. I don't know what it is. But it's Nolan. You know, like, it's funny how at this point, I mean, this happens to anybody that gets super famous or well known, but it's like, oh, like, you know, there's this weird, like, idea that like Nolan's not like a good director, or like he's overrated, and I think it's total bullshit. He's definitely like one of the best working directors these days, especially like in the realm of like big production movies, because really everything I see from him I tend to really like it. Like at a minimum I like really like it, but yeah, it's unfortunate because of the circumstances that we have. You know, Tenet would have already been out by now, and so would have other great movies, or potentially great movies, like No Time to Die, the 007 one, and Soul from Pixar. Like it sucks. This is a crazy year for many things, but for me, it was Free Guy. Free Guy, like,
I'm not a professional screenplay writer. I'm not a head honcho in LA that, gets commissioned for pieces. But once in a while you see a movie that kind of makes you not want to bother trying anymore. And Free Guy, the trailer for that came out. Ryan Reynolds says the best thing he's ever worked on. He's worked on a lot of great stuff. I think he said it was his favorite movie he's done or something. Basically what it's about is it's about a guy in a video game who has self-realization, and he realizes that he's just an extra in a video game and doesn't want to be anymore. So imagine in Grand Theft Auto, you're driving your car and you just see somebody walking with headphones and you're like, what is that character? Who is that character? There's that theory of what if we're all in a video game? What if we're all in that? And this is basically about him realizing this and then taking charge and wanting to become the hero. That looks just phenomenal. It was supposed to come out this summer, got pushed to, I think, December now. And then for me also, Antlers is the newest Guillermo del Toro horror movie. It's about a little boy in this small town who brings these drawings in. His teacher, played by Kerry Russell, brings them to her police officer brother in this town, played by Jesse Plemons. And they go out in the woods to find out what this boy has been bringing to this creature or who it is, and it just winds up being a very dark story. That's been my highly anticipated movie along with Free Guy.
Antlers looks incredible, honestly. That looks kind of horrifying. I'm very excited to see that one. It does.
And the trailer gives away a little bit of what the creature looks like, which I love. I'm a person who will pause it and in a trailer or watch Cloverfield and pause it to see more of the monster and Google it after and zoom in. I just love those things. So we'll have more movie news, every time with you. Every episode that we're doing, we'll bring up kind of release dates. And, really, if there was a movie you wanted to see, big movies and some smaller are waiting for the theaters to reopen. A lot of them are. At the same time, a good amount of them, I would say, the majority are coming out on demand. So if you want to see a movie, check on demand. It's probably on there for $20. And yeah, check it out, because without theaters, they're not making as much money on these movies. If you love a movie, rent it for $20. That way it can, get funded for a sequel or something like that. Yeah.
I think the real big, at least as far as I can tell, or as far as I know, success of a video on demand movie was the Trolls movie that came out this year, the World that made $100 million off VOD, and obviously that caused a huge conflict between AMC theaters saying they were going to play Universal movies. I actually have an article up right now because I guess AMC made a pretty historic deal with Universal, saying that they, rather than waiting, there's a typical 75 to 90 days before a movie can go from theaters to VOD or go on physical media. But I guess for Universal, they're going to allow them to only have to play a movie in theaters for 17 days. So how that's going to change once we're able to go back to the theaters, I don't know how much that's going to change everything. But I definitely had to bring that up quickly because I think that's a big deal. And hope maybe in the next episode there'll be more info on it. But I think that's pretty bold move as far as what theater chains are trying to do and what production companies and distribution companies are also trying to do as well. And
some distributors too are really trying to make their money back. So a lot of them are like, hey, I don't know when movie theaters are going to open next, but Christopher Nolan makes them in 70 millimeters, or whatever. Mm-hmm. He makes it where you need to see it in theaters, where it's not a lot of people. 1917 I could talk about. I appreciate that so much because it was done in one take pretty much. And that made the movie just the best thing ever. And a 2-hour play that you're watching with these two actors. Without that, I think it would have been a good movie. Sure. But sometimes you just need to see Avatar. You need to see a movie in theaters. You need to see Christopher Nolan movies in theaters. Ready Player One, I saw twice in IMAX 3D, and it costs a lot of money to do it. But it was being on a Disney World ride. Sometimes you have to experience it that way. So it makes sense with some of these movies where it's hey, we'll push it off a little bit more because people need to, appreciate it for what it is.
Right.
And yeah, movie theaters are apparently opening in August. If you do go, just treat it like you treat restaurants, I imagine. Walk in, and if they're not doing the kind of right safety precautions, it's not worth going to see a movie. But a lot of things are going to be, no more cash. no more anything. But I mean, you don't have to go up and buy tickets anymore. You don't have those transactions you need.
Yeah,
Just
that's actually a good point because I before AMC shut down, I had AMC A Plus.
Me too.
So I paid like 25. Yeah, amazing service because I paid like $25. You're able to see 12 movies a month, even 3D, IMAX, Dolby. Yep. So like it was a, if you're someone that sees even like 2 or 3 movies a month, it was absolutely worth it.
You can cut the concession line.
Yeah, you don't. Yeah, there's no handing of the ticket or money. It's just you hold out your phone, they scan it. So no contact. So I mean that's probably the way it should be, honestly, as far as theaters go, because limit the contact and everything else that comes into play with, again, maintaining that safety so everyone can enjoy the movie and be safe. Because like Mikey and many other people, I really miss the theater. I haven't been in one in like 4 months. I miss seeing movies.
I go alone to movies all the time. Like same with concerts. The older you get and the more your friends are busy, you're like, I want to see this movie. People are like, okay, let's go tomorrow. I want to see this movie. Oh, I can't go tomorrow now. Let's go next week. Like, and then the movie's out of the theater. So you really want to like make it count. So I go alone. I remember seeing Daddy's Home 2. With Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. I went to see that by myself, and I sat next to a dad and his like 3-year-old daughter, and I was a couple seats over from them, and I'm just this like, late 20-year-old dude at that time, just laughing so hard during the movie, and you could tell that it was like, what is this? Why is this guy here? But yeah, I mean, movies, concerts, and yard sales. Those are the 3 things that I miss so much right now.
I feel you, and it's fine. I'm the same way. Like, I love going with friends, but ultimately, like, probably since high school, I've been pretty actively going to the movies by myself. Because like, I don't want to wait for people. If I want to see a movie, I want to see a movie. And I'll bring it up quickly. Probably one of the funnier, at the time, it was embarrassing for me, but I don't really care anymore. But I think it was 2011. They put out a new animated version of Winnie the Pooh, and I'm still a huge fan of the original 77 version. I think it's one of my favorite like childhood classics. I think it's like just a great movie to show kids. It's really funny and sweet. And I was like, yeah, I want to see this movie, of course. So I went there by myself, and actually, like, again, it was a theater full of kids, but there was like someone I knew in my grade went with her boyfriend, and I didn't know that they were there. But like, I guess the following week at school, she was like, oh hey, she's like, I think I saw you at seeing Winnie the Pooh, and I was just like. Yep, that was me. Like, I'm just on a Saturday just watching Winnie the Pooh by myself. Like, but it's like, I don't care. Like, I'll see any. Like I said, I watch literally anything. It's like and I love going to the movies by myself. But
me too.
I do miss it.
We've been to so many movie screenings where if you go on GoFobo, a couple other websites, even check out like the local entertainment newspaper in your town. I know Boston had one, Denver has one. Like once movies are up and happening again, like you can go to screenings of movies and like see them with a packed theater and nobody's seen it yet. And it's free because they want you to tweet about it and post about it to get the word out there for when it actually comes out. And they're very fun events. You get free branded t-shirts and koozies and hats. So I'm looking forward to those again, definitely. And right now the drive-ins are happening, and they are. It's kind of like the few years ago, vinyl records sold more than CDs. Right now, drive-ins are where to go. There's concerts happening. We went and saw Jurassic Park and Jaws at the drive-ins a few nights ago. So definitely recommend it. I guess
awesome combo, but
let's get into it. Cabin in the Woods.
Let's do it.
Podcast is going to be longer, just us talking about it, talking about our podcast and our backgrounds. But this is our first episode. That's what it's about. Is
we can get away with it.
Laying the groundwork. We want people to connect to us. The Cabin in the Woods. It's a horror comedy movie. We are going to, of course, spoil some things on this podcast. We're not just going to tell you the synopsis and what cameras they used. We're going to tell you a little bit of, the whole kind of rundown of the movie, the fun facts about the movie that we learned through commentary. If you haven't seen it, this is a podcast to turn off and then play again after you've seen Cabin in the Woods. Cabin in the Woods is an experience where when I have friends who have not seen it, I'm jealous of them. I remember seeing it in the theater with a friend. We were both really big into horror. And I mean, I probably screamed at one of the parts of the movie, just in excitement and surprise. And we just walked out of there where it's one of those movies that sticks with you for days, if not like me for years. It's just so great. So basically Cabin in the Woods, it's It's about a movie about a cabin in the woods. It's these 5 college students that go out to party at a cabin, and things turn bad for them. And that's pretty much it. I mean, that's the general synopsis. And now is when I would say stop listening to the podcast if you haven't seen it yet.
Yeah. This is a good example, I guess, of like a podcast where you might literally want to stop if you haven't seen it, because this is one where I'm like, I would absolutely watch this without knowing anything about it, because similar to Mikey, when I saw this back in 2012, I remember seeing like I said earlier in the podcast, I remember seeing the trailer a couple times. I was like, all right, what is this? Some like basic horror movie. And then reviews came in, and I just saw these like, little snippets of reviews that were like, this is the most like intense, like deconstructive horror movie ever made. I was like, whoa, like what is this about? And obviously, like, even at the time, I kind of knew who Joss Whedon was. Even to this day, I really have never consumed a large body of his work, like Angels or Dollhouse or obviously Buffy. I still really have not seen much of it, but I do respect the guy a lot, and I probably will check those out eventually, especially like Firefly. But so like at the time, I kind of knew who he was. I kind of knew who Drew Goddard was, but still, like, nothing really could prepare me for this. And like my friend too, I don't think he knew like anything about this until like the couple of days before. I asked him, I'm like, hey, want to go see this movie? And we were both just like, holy shit, like this is like crazy. And like, the movie does so much where it takes the most basic of horror movie plots of college, of these young kids go and have fun and get their time is ruined and they're killed and everything, and it takes that and kind of flips it on its head, or it provides an additional idea. And I guess I'll say now that rather than these things just happening because of circumstance or whatever, it's like there are legitimate people in this underground facility who I guess work with the puppeteers, yeah, who work with the government in an effort to basically, they're appeasing the gods. That's literally what we know. Like, literally. These are over centuries and whatnot, over the span of human history, sacrifices were done to appease the gods so humans could continue living. And over the years, they've had to get more intricate to the point where now they have to, rather than just, actually, there's an amazing line in the movie where I think it's Bradley Whitford's character. He says something like, remember when you could just throw a girl into a volcano? So he harkens back to the idea of like, now you can't just do that. You have to create this intricate kind of plot where it basically is the setting of like a traditional horror movie where like they're trying to appease the gods with these characters, and like they're trying to make them fall in line and make them like more tropey, I guess, where like they're, you know what I'm saying? Like they have characters that are, you have your traditional jock, you have your traditional like blonde head girl and smart girl and your stoner. You have like all these like basic characters, these stereotypes, if you will, for like what is in other horror movies or slashers, I guess, specifically.
Like I said, blonde head girl.
Blonde head girl, yeah. Blonde head girl. Yeah, and like it's crazy. Like even watching it, I mean, I've seen this movie probably like 7 or 8 times now in my life, but every time it's like I'm still just like, I love it. Like it makes me feel so good, and like it's so fun. Like it's so fun, but also again, I think it does expertly kind of break down these tropes, and it explains like why they're kind of like why we've gotten so used to them as an audience, and like why we continue to see them even to this day. So like it definitely like kind of breaks down these ideas in somewhat of a satirical fashion. And what's interesting too is right from the beginning. So the intro credits, pretty standard horror stuff. It has sinister music, music done by what's his name, David. I have his name somewhere here. His David Julian, who has done a lot of amazing music, a lot of great scores. Actually, for a lot of Nolan movies, for like Memento, Insomnia, Prestige, and so this really sinister music's playing. We see images of sacrifices happening with like they're all blood stained. Just like a pretty basic like opening to a horror movie, and then it immediately cuts to this office setting. We see like an ad for like coffee on like a coffee machine, and then like so again when I first saw this, it's like, what is this? Like, well, why are we cutting to an office, this like really glossy office setting with Bradley Whitford and Richard Jenkins? Like, what's going on here? And so immediately, what I love about this is they don't like hold this off until halfway in the movie. From the start that there's something is up. This isn't your traditional horror movie. So like they're already establishing something else is going on in this world, and something isn't quite right. You're like, are these the dads of some of the college kids like that we're about to meet? Like, why am I watching this? And in the commentary, that's one of the cool things you learn is
is one, the blood spilling with the sacrifices and like the hieroglyphics in the opening was chocolate that they used. So you got to kind of learn more about, in movies when people fall through glass, like a lot of time it's like candy kind of glass, like it won't hurt you. It's just kind of a sugar glass.
Sugar. Yep.
But yeah, the opening scene of the movie, it follows them from a water bubbler getting into a little like golf cart and riding around this office. That was an actual office building. They filmed in the morning, they filmed at night in there. And then it freeze frames on them as they're just joking about whatever it is, like women and work and all of these things. And it freeze frames and it says in red, Cabin in the Woods. And they did it to confuse people. That was their goal, was to make it so you thought you were in the wrong movie, or like, just why am I here? Like, this is not what I paid for. And, I think the distributors in the movie were like, why did you do this? And they were like, for that reason. Like, we're talking about it now, almost 10 years later, because of how weird the beginning is. And I think that that's really like interesting.
But you know what's great about it too is like, there's something, it's not just for the sake of like the tricking the audience. Like, I think it's smart because it immediately takes you off your feet and you're automatically just like kind of honed into it, because you're like, what's going on? Like, why is this happening? And it definitely, again, I think what's cool is that not only does it establish this setting right from the bat, but it all at the same time, it doesn't give you all the information right away. Like, even after the scene, you're not quite sure like why there's this facility, what these people are trying to do. Like, they bring up kind of little tidbits about like other countries who are doing the same thing, about like creating these sacrificial like ceremonies in a sense, but that's all you know. And then kind of trickled throughout the movie, then you really see what they're doing, why they're doing it, how they do it. And this kind of contrast between what we'll call the upstairs and downstairs, upstairs being the kids in the cabin, downstairs being the facility, is really cool. Like, it's both funny, it's smart, and like, again, it provides that contrast, which really drives, I think, the movie home.
The back and forth, the comedic effect of The Office, and then the horror part
of the
people out in the woods. And then it immediately cuts right to the college kids. They're throwing footballs out the window, they're having fun. And the first kind of stereotype that they break is Chris Hemsworth. This kind of introduced the world to Chris Hemsworth, which we learned that after they sent the dailies out for this movie, he got cast in Red Dawn on a Thursday and then as Thor on a Saturday because of Cabin in the Woods, this kind of sleeper film or kind of, movie that was literally snoozed for a while, which we'll talk about until it got picked up. And it's now this cult movie. But Chris Hemsworth comes in, he's kind of the big football player, and he is looking at his friend's textbooks that she's reading, and he tells her to read something else on her shelf and uses this philosopher's name or something, and that breaks the first stereotype of he's not coming in and crushing a beer and smashing it on his head or talking about partying. He's like this literary kind of person, and like that right there breaks the stereotype from the movie, and like it really makes you go, oh wait, maybe this isn't the Cabin in the Woods kind of movie I'm thinking of, which the director and the writer Goddard and Whedon both said that not a lot of people picked up on when you first watch the movie. It's more like second time around you really start to focus on the characters and see like they're not the stereotypes you think that they are, which is interesting.
Yeah, I know I didn't really pick up on that because, it's funny because it's all like surface level stuff you focus on. Because obviously when Kurt comes in, who's played by Chris Hemsworth, he's wearing like the sports jersey and everything, or what's it called, the sports jacket.
Yeah.
And obviously Chris Hemsworth is a big dude, so you're just like, oh, this is the jock. Like, this is like the tough guy. And then, you have Dana, played by Kristen Connolly, who is in her room and she's kind of packing all the books, and then her friend comes in, Jules, played by Anna Hutchinson, who's like, no, don't take the books. We're here to have fun, And what's interesting, and I didn't even notice till like the last time I watched the movie for preparing for the podcast, she comes in and immediately Dana is like, oh my God, you dyed your hair. So like she dyed it blonde. So all these characters are used to her having, I guess, her being a brunette. But as an audience, we are seeing her with blonde hair for the first time. Mm-hmm. And then after this scene, you learn that the underground, they specifically like administered a specific dye that like seeped into her head to make her stupid. And to me, that's like, it's crazy because like even before they actually get to the cabin, they're already planting these little things to make everything go well, to make them fall into these categories, to make them fall into these personality types so that they'll die off in a certain way, or so everything will go smoothly. So that's something I didn't even realize until, again, like this is like the 7th time I've watched it. I didn't realize like I missed that line, I guess, every time where they just planted that die on her.
And then you have Marty.
And then obviously, yeah, Marty. Yep.
Marty comes in, played by Fran.
One of the funniest characters.
Fran Kranz, I believe it is, who did
Fran
Dollhouse.
Kranz, yep.
Who did Dollhouse. So they kind of cast him pretty early on, and
he's kind of a regular. Reading regular. He's
a pothead in the movie, and just like Jules's hair, you realize that Marty's weed has also been, tainted by the underground people. These people have also messed with his weed to try to control him and get him into this conspiracy, and that well, not conspiracy, but that's the thing too, is as their RV pulls off, one of the interesting things I picked up on this most recent time watching it is that Dana and Marty both get on the RV first before anybody else, and they're also the last 2 people at the end of the movie. So I don't know if that's something that's done. Sometimes people do a lot of hidden stuff in those Easter eggs. Sometimes it's just not intentional, but I thought that was interesting. And as you see them ride off in the RV, there's a guy on top of their dorm building, and he has like binoculars and a walkie-talkie, and he reports back to Whitford and Jenkins' characters. And that's the first part of the movie, really, where you're like, okay, there's a connection. Something's going on. Why are these people watching them out in the woods? What are they controlling? And still, even if you pick up on something at that part in the movie, you're still not going to get the end of the movie. You're still not going to know the real tie-ins, which is interesting.
No, not at all. Yeah, like I said, that's what I think is brilliant, because they're already feeding you this information, but you're still not you're not given enough of it at the moment to really connect those two, where you're like, oh, like, this is an underground facility that's making sure that these sacrifices go correctly so we please the gods. We don't know any of that yet, really. We just know that, you're right, the upground and above ground are connected. They're following them. They've been tracking them. And then it's funny, as they're in the RV driving there, Marty is rolling a bunch of joints, and he's talking about like how amazing it is, like, finally for once we can get off the grid, no cell phones, no people, even though it's like completely opposite of what's happening. He's going to be more on the grid than he's ever been in his life, but they don't know that obviously at the moment. But this is also like one of the first moments we realize how awesome Marty is, and how like, I wrote in my notes, I just wrote Marty is woke, because like, I know it's kind of like a dumb saying now, but like literally like, yeah. He's the one that's always just kind of on top of things. And like, I guess, like you said, they planted that weed on him, but I guess it backfired, because throughout the movie, he's the only one that's really picking up on like, hey, something is wrong. I think we're being watched in some way.
The chemical department of the underground, they're getting blamed for everything happening with like the weed and him becoming more aware of everything. Like, it's like the chemical department messed up in the past, and now they're kind of getting brought in again of why this scenario, like a very big screenplay rule is write something about something that happens all the time, but this time it's different. So, if we were to write a movie about our podcast, we wouldn't just write it about us talking for an hour and a half. We would write it about us doing a podcast, and then that one day a tornado strikes, or the same person ghost is in the back of both of our screens, things like that. That's exactly what Cabin in the Woods is that this sacrifice and ritual has gone smoothly almost every year. But this is the first one where other countries, Prague, all these other places or cities, everything around the world are not exactly like...
Yeah, they've messed up more. So, well, actually, it's funny because Jenkins brings up that USA is number 2, and then China, I think it's China or Japan is number 1. They've never skipped a beat. So, like, that's another thing you realize. Once you realize that all these other countries are performing the same rituals, you realize that a lot of them are failing. So they're kind of like, all right, now we got to rely either on Japan, or obviously we have to pull through to make sure that nothing, the Earth isn't destroyed. So like, it's funny. And that's another thing we'll get into soon, but like, it's funny. You got to get little, especially of Japan, but you get other little tidbits of like other countries and what's going on there. Like you see it on the monitors, like how they're failing or like what they're trying to do. So again, there's all sorts of stuff like that too. Stuff in the background. You find like
the
all
Japan,
characters are doing. So.
The Japan part's the best. I mean, later on
it's great.
It's a classroom with kind of like a Ring or Grudge kind of spirit coming out, and like Jenkins and Whitford's characters are just like, well, looks like even if we don't make this, you know, Japan's got this on lockdown. And then later on, you realize that these little kids in this classroom have overcome this spirit and defeat it. And the spirit goes away and comes back as like a happy tree frog. And like, but that was also them paying homage to Ringu and all of these Japanese. I mean, Japan is the most haunted place in the world. I mean, per capita, there's so many ghost stories there. And a lot of the kind of movies that you've seen here, I think The Eye with Sarah Michelle Gellar, a lot of those all started as Japanese horror films. So like if you want to see good horror, watch not just, you know, the monster Godzilla kind of movies, watch the ghost movies as well, because they inspired so much. So yeah, that's really there's so many paid like things that pay homage to horror in this, but I think what was really interesting listening in the commentary is that they didn't try to pick any actual people. There's no Mike Myers in this. There's no Godzilla. There's no you know, the kind of big people that you know of. There's no Chucky. It's just all horror characters that are like other ones, you know. There's werewolf, there's the zombies. There's the two kind of zombies in the movie too.
Yes. Well, yes, I think there's no you're right, there's no existing IPs in here. Like you're right, there is no Michael Myers, there's no Jason, none of that. But a lot of these, you're right, a lot of the monsters or creatures are slightly based on them. Both like newer ones and older kind of classical monsters like the werewolf, like you mentioned, or zombies. Also, too, I just want to go back to the Japan part because that scene is hilarious. Like when the little girl's like, she's like, we transferred the evil soul into a nice little frog. Like it's so funny. And then Richard Jenkins is just looking at the screen going, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you, fuck you. Because none of them died. They didn't get one kill. So like,
this class of like fourth graders, he's just yelling, fuck you, dude. It's so funny. Their characters throughout the movie. It's funny. I knew Richard Jenkins for a while. I didn't know much by Bradley Whitford. I literally knew him as the bad guy from Billy Madison, but like I hadn't seen West Wing. I hadn't seen him in a lot of things. And just, I thought it was so interesting. My wife was like, you know, how did this movie get Richard Jenkins and Bradley Whitford on board? And it's kind of one of those things where they say you do one for you, one for them. You can't not read this script and go, nah, like I'm good. Or like, will they give me 80 million? You're just like, yes, I want to attach my name to this. And what Goddard and Whedon talked about is they sent the script to him on a Friday. His agent sent it to Jenkins and was like, you got to read this. And on Monday he was like, yep. And, you know, to show how cool he was on set was they were filming at 5 a.m. in the morning and he had to be like out of breath in the scene. So he did a bunch of push-ups before they shot the scene. And when they were filming the big elevator scene in the kind of the start of the third act, he was there watching. He was on set when he didn't need to be on set. And like, he was just so on board and interested in everything, which says a lot about him and says a lot about Whedon and Goddard, because kind of to go over their background real quick, like they've been big for a while in the background, but you know, Tom and I know a lot of writers and directors. Not everybody knows who they are. They know more the stars of movies. That's what a lot of people really know. So they've been around forever. So it wasn't hard to get a good cast in this movie. You know, like they, you know, just kind of go over it. Drew Goddard worked as a co-executive producer and supervising producer on Lost. So he's worked with J.J. Abrams a bunch. Him and Whedon go back to, I think, late 90s, early 2000s doing Buffy, Angel, Alias, like Fringe, all these things. Joss Whedon wrote Toy Story, the first one. He wrote Alien Resurrection. He did Firefly and Serenity, which have been on my list for a long time. And then Whedon is, of course, very well known for the Avengers and writing Justice League. So Drew Goddard, this was the first movie he ever directed. He's directed 2 movies. He did this, and then he did Bad Times at the El Royale in 2018. Besides that, he wrote The Martian. He wrote World War Z. He's directed, The Good Place. So he's directed some television. He co-produced 10 Cloverfield Lane, the amazing sequel if you want to call it that, same universe as Cloverfield, which is a J.J. Abrams thing. So these guys have worked together forever. And basically how this movie worked was they were both working on feature films at the time, separate movies. Neither of them really got out there and distributed, but they locked themselves in a hotel room, a 2-story hotel room, which is shows you some Hollywood money right there, which is so cool. Locked themselves in a hotel for 3 days and wrote this movie, which is... We've been writing one screenplay for months, but we also, write a few times a week. We don't have 72 hours to work on something,
Yeah. I mean, it's inspiring, though, because it's like, again, with the product they had, it's cool that, it's so cool. Yeah, that they bunkered up and just literally hyper-focused on, like, let's write this script that, has been, like, building inside of us for so long. And, obviously has all these references from stories and movies they love. So like it really is a cool story.
It's
what's up?
Oh, I was just gonna say Sylvester Stallone wrote Rocky in like in a weekend. I mean, locked himself in his room and wrote Rocky. So I mean, it's so impressive. Goddard and Whedon both said like we didn't just come up with it. We had the idea, we had the cast in mind, but they hammered it out and wrote this in 3 days, which is just you watch the movie and I mean it's so impressive, especially when it's such a good concept and good movie like this, where like you can like if it were a bad movie and they wrote in 3 days, you'd go, yeah, that makes sense. But for being such a phenomenal, well executed movie, you go, they wrote this in 3 days. Like, come on, man. Like that's very inspiring, right. Like you said. And it's just so interesting. So yeah, I think that's kind of is just the director and writers have been around forever. It was easy to get this kind of cast on board, and Hemsworth wound up working with Whedon later on, Age of Ultron and, the Avengers movies.
Avengers and,
which is really cool.
Yeah. And that's the thing, 2012 was a big year, absolutely a big year for Joss Whedon. Cause obviously he had Cabin, which, I'll go into a sec, but that was supposed to come out, I believe, 2010, because it was actually filmed in 2009, completely filmed in 2009.
Vancouver
wasn't able to come out for years later for multiple reasons, and so it came out in 2012, like literally like a month, not even. I think it was like 2 weeks before the Avengers. I remember that, and then I think a couple of months later, he put out a smaller movie based on. It was just literally called Much Ado About Nothing, based on the Shakespeare play. And he did that with a bunch of his friends and like people he's worked with in the past. And that was, so he had like 3 movies. I mean, he didn't direct Cabin, but he had 3 movies come out that year. All of them like great to varying degrees and influential to varying degrees. And it's like, damn, like you're coming out big that year. And also, I think this movie just kind of almost has like in a way a dream team of collaborators, because we can talk about the cast more because obviously everyone's really great in their role, but like behind the scenes, obviously, Joss Whedon and Drew Goddard writing this together, but, even the cinematographer, Peter Deming, I didn't even realize until a little while back, but I mean, he's been DP on like Evil Dead 2, House Party. He's done stuff with David Lynch. I think he shot Mulholland Drive. So like I didn't even realize like how like prolific of a cinematographer he was until recently. But, so you got him on board. You got a great artist working for on music on this, as I mentioned earlier. You have Heather Langenkamp and her husband doing the kind of being on board for VFX. Who, if you don't know, Heather Langenkamp, known from being the star of A Nightmare on Elm Street, the original one, and I think actually Cabin was the last movie she did, if I'm not mistaken. But she's done a couple of movies. She's been in kind of the VFX world before, but it's really incredible, just like the amount of people you have in this movie that worked on it. And it's like going into it, you're like, oh, like that's why it worked so well. And even in the behind the scenes kind of featurette on the Blu-ray and DVD, there's one just based on the VFX and the prosthetic work. And like they kind of said that they kind of assembled like literally this perfect team that we're only able to get together for like a couple of weeks at a time, or for like the portion of the production to like, they got like the best seamstress, the best like person behind the gore, like for everybody to really nail this end scene, that really was so like, not to say that the rest of the movie wasn't still great and smart, but like a lot of it, like it was just all building up to this like explosive, crazy scene that I didn't even know that I needed it until I saw it. Like when I watched it for the first time, I was like, that's like what I've always wanted. As a horror fan, like, it's just not what you've always wanted. Just to watch like perceivably every like horror monster movie in like the same room and like what would happen. Because like that's something, you know, again, after watching it, I'm like, yeah, I'm like, I've always wanted to see that. Like it's like, what if you took Michael Myers and Jason, put them together, or like any of these random assortment of monsters? Would they kill each other? Like who would win? Like what would happen? And it's like you definitely get that in the end. But yeah, like, you know, it really is amazing, like how this movie came together in the first place. And again, something else they bring up, I don't know if you remember from the podcast, Mikey, but they bring up how this being delayed until 2012 was actually kind of a great thing, because if they had released in 2010, you know, nobody would have known who Chris Hemsworth was.
Yep.
But, you know, waiting until, you know, this was a year after Thor came out, a bunch of people already knew who he was. So he kind of had a leg up in that department of, you know, him already having kind of a name brand already. You know, people already know he's already a household name by the time this came out. So
yeah, the movie was filmed in Vancouver in 2009.
Yes. Yep.
From I believe March to May. Supposed to come out in 2010. Was supposed to be distributed by a production company that was going under, so they wound up shelving the movie. And if I remember reading this correctly, Joss Whedon or Drew Goddard put out an ad in a newspaper that said like write movie, check, film movie, check, distribute movie, and left the box blank. This is kind of like the urban legend of how it came to be. And a production company saw it and was like, hey, let's go back and watch that. So the movie was indefinitely shelved, which is like, if you look at like you can look every year at movies that are shelved, whether they're screenplays that still haven't been auctioned off and purchased yet and put into production, or just movies that got made and never put out. I mean, look at your favorite actor's IMDb page. There's movies on there that you've never heard of that you probably can't find, which is just super interesting. So the movie got shelved and didn't come out until April 13th, 2012. Filmed in Vancouver, where everything's being filmed these days. Being filmed in Vancouver, and it was being filmed along similar sets of the Twilight movie. That was very interesting. So like a lot of the time they were filming, it was right around like Twilight and all that too. So it's, yeah, I mean, Vancouver is really a happening place these days where I watched a TV show that took place in San Francisco, and then you look it up and it's filmed in Vancouver. So, I mean, they must have, like Atlanta, it's a place you don't think about, but if you were to go there and see the sound stages and the designs, like they have enough there to make you look like you're anywhere.
Yeah, you're right. And one thing that is brought up, you know, that Goddard has commented on is when they got to that location for the cabin, they were like, this couldn't be any more perfect, because the forest was so massive, and like, you know, they had these sprawling trees and this beautiful greenery, and like it just kind of matched like this is like what you think of when you think of a horror movie of like a cabin in the woods with people chilling and then bad things happening. This is the location you expect to see. And again, it was shot beautifully, you know, like I mean, especially later on when we now kind of get into the first initial kills, because we have the first one is of Jules, where both her and Kurt are going to go out and, you know, have sex in the woods. And it's funny how this happens too, because this is also where you see the beginning of like how much control downstairs has over upstairs. I mean, they can control temperature, they can control lighting, because as they go outside, you know, Kurt wants to have some fun, and she's like, no, it's too cold, I don't want to take my clothes off. And then he's able to crank up the temperature of the environment, literally.
They release pheromones.
And then they release pheromones, so they get horny. And like, so the funny thing is, like, to get a little bit more like deep into it, there is this idea of like free will in the movie, because even after the first kill, after Jules is killed, they mention that, you know, or I guess it's funny, they have a bodyguard with them, Bradley, because, you know, obviously Woodford and Jenkins are like they're the main people controlling this. They're the ones that are on top of it. So they're like the kind of the bosses of this, you know, and they have a bodyguard with them. Daniel, played by Brian J. White, who's kind of, this is like his first day on the job, literally, is like securing them, making sure nothing happens. He's like
a veteran coming out of the military and like doesn't know what exactly this
super
thing
serious.
Is.
Yeah, super straight line. And like he's like you're controlling this. He's like no. He's like, we're not. He's like, they have free will. He's like, but we're just setting things up. So specifically, there's the basement scene where they find all the trinkets that would unleash a specific monster.
If you open this music box, you get the dancer. If you read this, you get that. Yeah, that's the basement scene. Is they open the basement door, which gets the college students to go down there in the first place, or else nothing would have happened.
Exactly, yeah. So that's what triggers them going downstairs, and that's when you find all. And it's a fun scene too, because there's actually some like suspense to it as far as what they're going to choose, but also trying to like detail like, all right, what is that? What does that relate to? It's like there's a conch shell, there's a film strip that Marty's looking at, there's the hell raising, or the pinhead looking like whatever that thing is, that like sphere that like
which comes back later on when they first get on the elevator and they see the guy holding it. That's when Dana's character Kristen Connolly says, "We chose the redneck zombie torture family because we wrote that diary entry. Because of that, we chose who was going to come and kill all of us." And yeah, I mean, there's a lot more in the basement that if you could put some bright on, maybe in that scene, you could probably find what was going to release the werewolf, the giant spider, what was going to release the twins, what was going to release the merman, which is Bradley Cooper. He's always rooting for the merman to be the thing to kill the people. But yeah, that basement scene is a big catalyst as well. And like you said, like they said, we kind of control it, but like if they didn't go to the basement, nothing probably would have happened, which is interesting. But they know people are curious. They've been doing this for decades, if not centuries. I mean, literally centuries from what we guess. So they know that people are going to go to the basement. They are going to do this. And yeah, that's the first death we see. Once we see Jules's character killed with a bear trap, pretty much, which her shirt is off in a scene and then her shirt is back on when the bear trap is getting her. And I learned that that's because they couldn't attach it to her like without a shirt on. So they had her put her shirt back on to have that prop kind of work that way. And when she dies, you see the blood trickle down. And then they say a prayer for her back at the office building. And like, you almost feel like they're human and they're not okay with what they're doing. But then they start celebrating and they're like, all right, we got 1 out of 5. We're on track. We're gonna keep this going.
Yeah, that seems great too. Cause you're right. Like they come back, they're very like sullen. They're like, this is serious. Like, they're praying for her.
We don't want to have to watch this.
Yeah. And then I think Whitford's character, he just turns and see his actually, I don't know if this is is this the scene when he turns and he sees his friends with tequila and he goes, tequila is my lady.
Which was improvised, which was like his 8th take. And he said that on his own. And they're like, we don't get why he said that or even what it means. But yeah, like completely improvised where they were just like, run with it. So, like there was a lot of improv done on set with Jenkins and Whitford. And that was a big one of the improv lines, I believe. Improvised lines.
Good.
Yeah,
that's one of my favorite lines. Definitely,
they start celebrating. So a lot of the office scenes are between Wendy Lynn, played by Amy Acker, Alex Truman, played by Brian J. White, and then you have Gary and Steve Whitford and Jenkins, and they're kind of in this one room, operating things, make things go smoothly. And then there will be the next scene where everybody from the office is down there celebrating, and they're like, chemical department, sorry, we thought you messed this up, and let's party, we did this. So you see like this whole office building of people who go to work every day planning to kill 5 people to sacrifice them to gods that used to run the world and now live underneath it and need to drink this blood or else they're going to take the world back over, which is the plot and ending of the movie. And I just have to say 2 parts in the movie is one is the whiteboard scene. You see a whiteboard that so has good. They like, so you start to think that like, they don't really like what they're doing. This is before Jules is killed. Before, when they're in the basement, they pick the journal, they read the diary, and that's how they wind up getting the redneck zombie torture family. Not to be confused with zombies. If you root for zombies and you get redneck torture zombie family, you do not win. But they wind up placing bets, and the military guy whose first day is there, he's like, how can you do this? How can you bet on how these people are going to be killed? And they're like, you get used to it. And that's where the whiteboard comes into play. And that is, I think, one of the most brilliant parts of the movie. They were tasked, Goddard and Whedon were tasked on a Friday. They said, hey, we're filming the whiteboard scene. What are you going to do for it? They wrote it over the weekend and came in and Monday. And the whiteboard, we'll probably put a picture up of it. But the whiteboard has on it werewolf, alien beasts, mutants, zombies, clowns, witches, sexy witches, demons, hell lords, giant snake, mummies, bride, scarecrow, snowman, dragon bat, Sugar Plum Fairy, Merman, Unicorn, which we see later. You see it in a very brief whiteboard scene. Dolls, The Doctors, Zombie Redneck Torture Family, which Maintenance winds up getting. Jack-o'-lantern, giant twins, and then there's Kevin written on the board. So it's one of those subtle things we have to watch back. There's just the name Kevin, which reminds me of the scene in Up where he names the bird Kevin, and then he finds out it's the girl. Those were very similar kind of things. And also, if you look at the whiteboard, and they showed in the movie, there's a guy named Ronald who's an intern who also, I believe, votes for Zombie Redneck Torture Family and splits the winning with Maintenance. That right there. For me, I love subtle parts of movies where not a lot of people pick it up the first time around. There is an intern. There is somebody who is interning at this facility that sets up 5 people to get killed by some monstrous beast or beasts every year to sacrifice themselves to the gods. And I just think, how do you find that internship? How do you put that on your resume? Where does that lead you to next? When you go to a job and somebody goes, tell me about your internship, what do you say? I mean, that subtle part, I think he has a line or two in the movie, really just brings out the brilliance of that movie.
Yeah, it's not overstated. It's just kind of he's an intern. And, and it's just, you're right. It's just funny because of these little quirks and comparisons to an office setting. And actually, Goddard has said it in commentary and in interviews and whatnot that I believe, you might know more about this, Mikey, but I think the setting for this was based on a nuclear launch site, because I believe his father actually worked there, and he went there when he was a kid too. And I think he said in an interview about how, when he went there, here's this amazing, he's this grand place with these incredibly smart people, maybe some of the smartest people in the world, doing something absolutely horrifying, which is in that case was working on nuclear weapons that could wipe out the entire race. In this case, it's working with gods that could wipe out the entire race. So it's you're right. There's that this clash between, again, people doing bets and drinking and talking about what they're going to do on the weekend. Bradley in the beginning talks about how he's going to liberate his cabinets because his wife put on these little stoppers for their children or whatever. It's all this mundane shit while they're doing the worst thing imaginable.
How are they that subtle conversation wise when they're about to go watch 5 people be brutally murdered?
Yeah, and it kind of in a sense has that Tarantino vibe where especially if I relate to Pulp Fiction, where this is, everyone talks about the scene forever, but the scene with Jules and Vincent, they're about to go kill somebody, and they're talking about him going to France and seeing the different names of Whopper, or seeing the Big Mac, the different name changes, or different, it's these mundane, unrelated conversations before something bad's gonna happen. And that contrast obviously has been replicated and repeated, but here's an example where I don't think they were specifically according to Tarantino, obviously, but it kind of has that similar feel to it, and it works really well. Like I said, I think obviously because you have the good writing, but also these actors that just know how to pull it off. Clearly Jenkins and Whitford are both pretty well seasoned character actors that just kind of know what they're doing and really just play this role well. Yeah. But yeah, that whiteboard scene, probably one of the best scenes in the movie, easily the funniest. And obviously, it's funny when they go back to it too, or when they're actually partying after they think everyone has died, all the kids have died. They're in that room partying, which I also want to say that scene. So again, it ends up with forgetting her name. What's her name? Dana being presumably the last person. And obviously they even say in the movie, which again kind of falls in line with old horror movies or slasher movies, that the virgin can survive. Yep. It doesn't matter. She can live or die. The gods don't care as long as everybody else dies. So there's a shot, she gets out of the RV because the RV crashes into the lake. Which they were
going to film a much longer underwater scene with Jesse Williams, who plays Holden. Him and Dana's character, they're both in the RV after Chris Hemsworth dies. Which is,
man, that scene.
As they're heading to the cabin, a bird flies into an electric fence that's invisible, kind of like a dome under the dome, that kind of thing.
So, some early foreshadowing there.
And then Chris Hemsworth, kind of as the macho guy, takes his dirt bike to jump where they almost get out of the tunnel. They leave the cabin, they get out of the tunnel almost, and then Jenkins rushes to collapse the tunnel on them. Hemsworth decides to take his dirt bike and jump over it, and he hits the electric fence, and he just drops hundreds of feet to his death, which is like,
ragdoll.
Especially if you just saw him in Thor, now you're watching this giant actor just die in the craziest way possible. But yeah, two things that I learned was Jesse Williams, as they're driving the RV, he gets stabbed. They originally filmed it as a close-up, and apparently it's so gruesome they didn't use that in the film. And then Dana pops up in the water in the RV. She's back at the lake, and they had a lot longer underwater scene, but didn't wind up using it. The movie's a straight hour and a half, which is very interesting. You don't see that a lot in movies anymore. I mean, Brightburn was an hour and a half long movie, just like exactly that, which is interesting, and they really pulled it off. But yeah, so you were saying the underwater scene, Dana getting back.
Well, yeah, and we'll get into we got to talk a little bit more about Kurt's death too, because that is a crazy scene. But yeah, so so after the RV crashes, she's presumably the only one alive. She crawls onto the deck, and immediately she's grabbed by the head of the Hutchinson family, who's the zombie rednecks. And this has like my favorite like technical part of the movie, because like when he grabs her, it cuts to the monitor inside the office. It zooms out of that as she's being destroyed, and then you hear what's the song they're playing? They're playing REO Speedwagon's Roll With The Changes, and just like the edit on like a technical film level to me is so satisfying, because like you think like this is it, like she's dead, and that song starts playing, and like they're all partying, they're drinking, they're talking about like they're kind of being self-congratulatory. They're just like, oh, like what an amazing job we did, killing these people indirectly, and like we pleased the gods, and like to me like that edit's so good, because like it's the real like beginning of the third act. They make
the movie seem like it's over. She's getting killed, they presume, by the last monster, the camera pans out slowly into that monitor and the music plays, and it literally makes it seem like, okay, like the last one's dead. We saw Kurt get dragged out of, or Marty get dragged out of a window earlier. We presume he's dead, and they literally make it seem like, hey, this is the end. We did what we needed to. USA did it, and the world can keep continuing as it is. That music, that editing, that cut, and that kind of blend is really great. What were you saying about you were saying about the Los Alamos, New Mexico thing? So basically, Goddard was from there. Everybody from there are geniuses. They're all rocket scientists who make explosives and bombs, for our enemies. And basically what this movie had to do with that is this movie is all about belief systems. So basically you watch this movie and you think, hey, both people are right. The people in the cabin don't want to die, but the people not in the cabin in the office want them to die so civilization can keep continuing. So it's that kind of internal struggle of who do we root for? Who are the good guys? Who are the bad guys? In Los Alamos, you have people building these things, and they just go to work every day to provide for their families. But in the end, they are creating these things that are going to kill other people, and it's that internal struggle. One of the guys talks about The Breakfast Club. The more you watch it later on in life, the more you relate to the principal, and you're like, maybe he should give Anthony Michael Hall or whoever's character, is it Judd Nelson, like another detention. He should give him another this. He should give him another that, because he's speaking up, like he's being obnoxious, and you start to, my guinea pig's talking right now, which I don't know if it's gonna pick up. I don't know. Yeah, if it picks up, it sounds like you're living with the movie Psycho. Like if you were married to the person, if you were married to the person who scored Psycho, you would essentially be living with my guinea pig. Like every time you open the cabinet to get his food or get carrots, you just kind of hear like the re, like every time. It's hilarious, especially as a fan of horror. It's very funny. But yeah, that's the Los Alamos background, and kind of, it's one of those things where you're like, hey, this makes no connection. How is Los Alamos connected to that? But it does work in a way, definitely.
Yeah, and that's a good point. You actually brought up a great point about kind of this movie posing like a surprisingly like some moral implications, where you're like, you think like, all right, this is horrible. They're like literally indirectly helping these kids, these teenagers, or these college students die. But you're like, well, but they kind of have to, because it's either them or it's the entire human race and every other species that exists on planet Earth. So it's like, it's funny because even though this is like satirizing horror, and on one level it's just kind of this fun movie, it's also like, you actually do get those questions, and they're they drive home. They actually do work where you're like, shit, like I actually don't know. Like maybe Jenkins and everyone that works at this facility is just trying to save the human race, and this is the only way they really know how. There's no other way they can take out they can't just kill the gods, like so that is interesting. And
you wonder that to the last second. I mean, the last second of the movie is they wind up on the steps by the hieroglyphics of themselves. Sigourney Weaver, alien, I mean, who Joss Whedon wrote Alien Resurrection in 97. He's been working with her forever. She's the main voice who explains everything to Marty and Dana while they're on the elevator. Basically,
she's the director.
Marty saves Dana from the dock where the leader of the zombie redneck torture family is about to kill her. He uses his bong coffee mug that's in the opening of the movie. And they go underground. He's like, I found this elevator underground. We need to go see what is going on. Like, obviously, he knows they're puppeteers. He knows there's something going on. She does too. And then Sigourney Weaver comes to them, and there's that internal struggle to the very last second of the movie. I even asked my wife last night the question of, they wind up in the very last second. Dana is about to kill Marty, because if she kills Marty, then civilization goes on and her friends and family survive and there's a future. And then she winds up getting attacked by something, and then Sigourney Weaver comes in and tries to kill him because she's like, you need to die. And then at the very, end of it, they wind up killing Sigourney Weaver because of one of the redneck torture family members comes back into the room that they're in, and they sit there smoking a joint, and they kind of decide there's 8 minutes till the sun rises. Do we let these gods take back over and let a new world start over again, or do we kill ourselves and let humanity kind of carry on? And that's such, up to the very last second of the movie, such an interesting thing, and one of those things where you leave a movie saying, what would I have done in that scenario? Would I have jumped off and sacrificed myself so people could live on, or would I have been like, hey, screw it, let's just let the gods come back up again, and a new civilization will come. That's an extinction.
Yeah, and this is another, I mean, there's a slew of like amazing Marty moments, but the one when the director, Sigourney Weaver, gives him that ultimatum, like, you can either kill yourself and save humanity, or you can let the gods take over. And then he says something, I don't know if I'm gonna say verbatim, but he's just like, God, he's like, both options are so enticing. And it's like, it's true, because like he has so either option is like an incredible amount of power. He can literally save humanity or wipe them out. Like he has like in an instant, like he can just kill himself, and I guess the gods would be pleased. But you're right, it like, you kind of sit there and you're like, yeah, what would I do if I were in this incredibly unique situation? Like, would I end it, or would I say fuck it? Like, if humanity has to survive in this fashion, just killing innocent people, then maybe we don't deserve to be alive. I don't know. And so it's like,
the whole movie you're watching the people in the office play God, literally just controlling what happens to these people. And then in the last 3 minutes of the movie, you have Dana and Marty both playing God. Because I mean, I think Sigourney Weaver says a great line that's like, it's one of those, you live long enough to see the hero become the villain. It's like one.
Are you talking about the Dark Knight thing? Yeah.
Yeah, it's the
you
line,
live long enough to see yourself become the villain.
Yeah, Sigourney Weaver says, like, you have 8 minutes. You can either watch the sunrise and then the demise of civilization, or make the right decision in her mind and pretty much off yourself to save humanity. And yeah, he says like exactly that. Both options are very enticing, as he's like pulling a joint out to kind of make that decision with Dana. And that struggle of Dana apologizes to him and is like, I'm sorry, I almost killed you. And he's like, I get it. Like, in that moment, you probably wanted civilization to go on. And it's just a movie that's not a Hollywood ending. I love a movie where everybody dies at the end. Especially this, where every single person on Earth, every human dies. But I love an ending like that. Like, I'm sure, Goddard and Whedon said, hey, we sent this, the production company that wound up picking this up, they didn't say anything. They didn't change one word in our movie, which happens a lot. They didn't say change the whole
Yes.
third act, replace this actor with this actor. And a lot of times I'm sure they would have said, do you really want that to be your ending? That's more of an ending, I would say, for a straight to DVD movie or a sci-fi movie. But this is a theatrical cult film now where it ends in a way that you would have not imagined.
Yeah, the typical ending would have probably been like Dana surviving and she's on like a police boat with like a blanket around her. And she's going back home. Like that would have been like the most typical ending ever. Like and which would have made no sense for this movie, obviously. Like that would have been kind of a slap in the face. But, but you're right. Like this ending is definitely not anything you'd see in a big production, like a tentpole movie, and it works. And like it's it's cool. Like literally the last shot of the movie is a deity's hand, like a god's hand, shooting out of the cabin and then just like collapsing on the camera, and like that's it. Like
there's a couple scenes like that where blood splatters and covers the camera, and then they kind of like cut to a next scene transition wise. But yeah, that's the best ending of the movie is the hand comes up, you get to see the gods. It doesn't just cut to black. It doesn't leave up to your imagination. You see the hand come out of the cabin. So it's like, there are these giants all over, but you get to see the one coming out of the cabin that the movie was focused on. And it hits the camera, ending civilization, ending the movie, which is just it's so cool. I can nerd out about this movie forever. So yeah, I think there's it's unlike anything that's ever been done. It's unlike anything that probably will ever be done. There's no sequel, no prequel in mind. I don't think that they would ever do one. But maybe it is that Christopher Nolan Batman kind of thing where it's like, I have no interest in doing a prequel or sequel, but if somebody came up with a compelling enough story, maybe. But I would watch a prequel. I would want to see what happens 100 years ago when just the woman's getting thrown in the volcano, or, what was it like when Bradley Whitford or Richard Jenkins were an intern here? You can't really do much of a sequel to this.
That could be interesting if they did going back to like even like maybe like the 40s or like 30s or 40s before Richard Jenkins and Whitford were there. So like you could see like this old timey, like again, like post or pre World War II setting. Like, I mean, honestly, there is like things you could do with this premise. One of my friends who also loves this movie was telling me like how he would love to see an extension, like a mini series or something. And I agree to an extent. I kind of disagree in a way, only because what I think is ultimately brilliant about this movie is, since I've seen it, like since the first time I saw it, like I can watch like any horror movie, and in a way I can like kind of put my mind and be like, like, is there like an underground facility making all this happen? Like you can kind of apply this logic to like other horror movies, especially really basic ones, like any basic slasher movie. You're like, all right, like maybe this whole movie is just secretly just like about pleasing the gods. Who knows? Like, and again, that's what's so smart about it, because you can apply that logic, and it's kind of sound, and not for every horror movie, obviously, but you can kind of apply it for a lot of movies. And also, like, I mean, I guess if you were to make a miniseries, another movie, like you kind of know how it's going to end. Like the people who are being sacrificed, they're going to die, but I mean, I guess it's cool. It'd be cool to see other creatures, other characters, how they respond. Maybe other characters that almost got out of the situation and died. I mean, actually, I don't know if they go into the detail, but didn't, because obviously they said that Jenkins said that USA is number 2 because they did have one slip up. Yeah. So maybe they could even make a miniseries or a movie about that slip up. Maybe, I don't know.
And and is that woman in a mental facility now? Like you said, it's her. It could have ended with her on a boat with the blanket around her. But then what? She goes to somebody and says, "All my friends were killed by people in a controlled lab to sacrifice the gods." Like, she's not going to tell anybody that story. But that would be super interesting. There could have been a web series where you saw what every other country was battling. Like Japan was battling the ghost. I think that would be really cool to do that. That could have been some kind of cool stuff to play with as the movie was coming out, kind of like teaser things with that. But really, I don't think it should get a prequel or a sequel. I just think it's so perfect as it is. But like, there are some things where I'd love to see. There have been new horror icons since this movie has been made. There's new slashers. There's new things that, like we said, they don't use actual Mike Myers or Jigsaw in this, but it'd be cool to see newer kind of horror icons kind of thrown in there. And you see a giant spider at one point in the big glass cage, but you don't really see anything else with it, because I think that they didn't want to use that because that can scare audiences more than anything. What does that kind of look like if there was You know, it seems like the redneck zombie torture family won a lot. Like they're always the ones who come forward. What would it be like if there was a movie with the merman?
Yeah, or the snake.
And
the
the giant snake, the unicorn that just spears people.
The unicorn or the dragon bat, or like, there's other ones where like that, like what scenario or how different would that look like, especially in a cabin setting like this, or like, I know they show a failed one, a mission in Madrid, and it's like I can't remember like exactly what it looked like, but it looked like some huge facility, and it was like, oh, if they failed in Madrid, so like I wonder what that one was. It looked like it was like something that was on, like a huge facility was on fire. So like, you know, again, there is like technically, there is like all these like endless almost like ways you could like approach this idea and like, you know, work off of it. But yeah, I don't know if I'd like to see. I mean, at the end of the day, it's like I just want to see new stuff. You know, like I'd rather see somebody else create a new kind of horror comedy or new satirical work that kind of, you know, because like not that this is related in any way really, but I just finished season 1 of The Boys on Amazon, and to me that's like the best recent example of creators tackling the idea of superheroes and how they would actually like what they'd be like in real life. So like it's doing something much different with that genre. So I think we could use other examples, or there could be I'd rather see a newer movie that tackles and deconstructs horror in a different way.
I recommend,
rather than just an extension.
Definitely recommend James Gunn's Brightburn. It's the exact kind of concept as The Boys. It's not a comedy. It's not a comedy whatsoever. It's very disturbing, but it's exactly what would happen if Superman was like, hey, I'm not going to use these to save people. I'm going to use it for something else. It's was
that directed by Gunn?
Written by Gunn. That and the Belko Experiment, which I'd love to talk about on here sometime. I know Belko Experiment was a nightmare he had that he turned into a movie. I think Brightburn was kind of the same, where he wrote it and then some other people kind of picked it up. I mean, he's working on even bigger things than that. So those are two fantastic movies, especially Belko Experiment. But yeah, like you said, it doesn't really, you'd like to see another movie take on this. I would highly recommend Dale and Tucker versus Evil. It's Alan Tudyk, which you know as Steve the Pirate in Dodgeball, and Death at a Funeral, Tyler Labine. He's from so many TV shows and movies. Deadbeat is one of them. The Planet of the Apes, one of the newer ones. And it's basically, it's the exact same story as Cabin in the Woods, but not. It's, the story. College kids go out to the woods and then something happens to them. And it's basically, I can't explain it. I don't want to explain it, but it follows Tyler Labine and Alan Tudyk, who are kind of two rednecks who go out in the woods for a vacation, just away from their normal days. And then college kids are out there and they both kind of get caught up in the same mess. And it's straight up comedy. I mean, very disturbing. The kills in it are extremely graphic, but it's more comedy and less paying homage to a lot of big killers out there and things like that and slashers. But I would definitely recommend that. That is as
I'll watch that soon.
That's
one I've been meaning to see for a long time.
Yeah, it's funny as hell. But yeah, there's nothing like it, and it's one of those movies where another big screenplay writing trick and advice is if you can take something from something off and pull it off, you compliment you and what you did. Think about how many movies have taken the American Pie recipe of somebody doing stuff in their bedroom and their grandma walks in. There's so much, not even from American Pie sequels and spinoffs, but so many other movies like that have kind of gone down that road. And if you could pull it off, then it works. If not, you're stealing it, and it's now you're kind of the bad person for doing it. But Tucker and Dale vs. Evil, very different, equally as brilliant, and just so hilarious. And the cast is so good, and just two good character actors really in it. But yeah, I just don't think we're going to see something like this again. I mean, how do you write anything like this? Belko Experiment is similar. Definitely similar in some ways with the cameras and the kind of Big Brother watching. There's definitely some similar shots in that, which are really cool.
Right.
But yeah, I just don't think we're going to see anything else like this. And that's all right. I don't think we're going to see a remake of it in 20 years. And Whedon and Goddard, they're two of the people who really have Hollywood in their hands and can make what they want to make. And this was one of those movies that went from a shelf to a cult hit that skyrocketed Chris Hemsworth's career. I mean, yeah.
Right.
So
yeah, no, absolutely. And like, it's, yeah, you're right. There is definitely like an audience for this movie that really, like us, really loves and respects it and knows what it's trying to do. And yeah, I mean, I know we are both kind of biased. We both really love it. But if I had to critique in any way, really the only thing I can think of is there's kind of a Deus Ex Machina moment in here when like, so, you have Marty and Dana, they go downstairs. They're finally in like the control area. They're in the facility. And when they send the soldiers out, they run into this little control room near the elevators, and there's a purge button. And that's literally what it is. It's just a purge button that allows all the creatures to be let out. And that was intentional, like, because that's like comical at this point. Like, oh, like there's a bright big purge button right there. And
no override key.
Yeah.
Like you can just press the button and release every possible monster internally into the office to kill everybody.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. So it's like, and I understand, like even Goddard has said like it was purposely done that way because it's like, that's like so cartoony in a way. And like,
yeah.
But I don't know, part of me feels like maybe there could have been a little bit more of a creative way to go about that. But that's like, to me, that's really the only critique I have. Like I really just love this movie. I really just respect it. And like, every time I watch, like you said, I really do pick up on like these little small details, and like I think the jokes, all the humor, like still really holds up well. And like I said, the idea is executed perfectly. Like the ending is so satisfying to just watch, all these people at the facility kind of reap what they sow. Like now the monsters are attacking them, and every conceivable
SWAT
monster
teams,
comes out.
Everybody's coming in.
Yeah, SWAT teams are wiped out. Nobody's safe. It's a absolute bloodbath. You have the unicorn that stabs somebody into a wall.
Yep.
You have the I think it's the dragon bat that like crashes into a guy into the wall.
And then the dragon bat throws somebody into the giant like anaconda who's on the lower level.
Yeah.
It's just a total bloodbath. And I think you hear the elevators ding 3 times. Like it's one group of the people, the second group, the third. And when you see that SWAT person turn and look at the elevator and the doors open and they're like, oh no. And that's like the first scene where you see the redneck zombie torture family comes back. They play a part throughout to the very end of the movie. Yeah, I would say it's just the best. The only thing, like I said, is to see, I want to see more of the monsters and more of the kind of, I guess, scenes at the end with all the killings. But the merman comes back and kills Whitford, which he's just like, he went the way he always wanted to see everybody else go, which is so interesting. And, he finally got what he wanted, was to see the merman up and close. And that's another thing. Yep. Did they know what all the monsters were? Have they seen them all? Do these monsters get fed? Do they have maintenance done on them? They're pretty much, that's one thing I wanted to know more about rewatching it the other day, is like they say that all of these monsters are old folklore, which they are, they're old folklore. So what is that like? Where are these monsters? Are they always living on the elevator? Did the gods present these monsters? I'd like to know a little more on that.
And actually, you just saying that now, that kind of like makes me think if they were to touch this again and be like, all right, we're going to make a series out of this or something, it could just be like solely on the facility and how they do all this, like the background stuff. Like it could be like, you're right, how maybe they do have maintenance teams and like they show maintenance teams like being ripped apart and like, fuck, we send in the next team or whatever. Literally like, you're right. Do they have to feed them? Do they have to maintain them? Do they have to speak to the god? Do they have any real form of communication with the gods to make this happen? And like all the other departments, like, so if they were to do that, that would kind of be, I think, the direction to go. And that would be like cool. Smart and interesting, in a different direction.
Never leave the office. And like, is that intern Ronald? Is he how long has he been interning? Like, what is he the new intern? Because the other intern had to go to the elevator to feed the giant snake and got eaten by the snake. There's so much you can do with it. Who are these monsters? Yeah. So Yeah, I think that's there's more you could do with it. It'd be I know there's a book about it where you can learn more about the whiteboard and kind of that is a book I'm willing to pick up, and I'd love to read the screenplay, and it's just so well done in 3 different acts, and the guys behind it even said like when the 3rd act really starts, nobody in that testing and audience room really went like, nah, not for me. Nobody was really like, oh, like everybody was just on board with that 3rd act of those elevator doors opening and really just the bloodbath starting. And you realize that you're not just watching these 5 people get killed. By the end of the movie, I believe that the death count was estimated at 69, which was something that they put in there as a joke. Like you see 69 get killed on camera, 69 people, but there is a lot more than that overall. And essentially 7 billion people dying in the very last scene. And that's what I would like to know is how did the monsters kill people? Like are the giants' hands just coming out and just squashing villages and cities and people? Is it a giant earthquake that sucks people into the core? I don't know. Where are these giants living? Are they living? Where are they in our Earth?
I would imagine it's just like Armageddon. It's just like ultimate chaos. Like there's like earthquakes, there's tsunamis, there's like just everything like conceivable, like it's just attacking people at once.
Yeah.
So
yeah. So I guess to wrap it up, one thing we kind of want to talk about just towards the end of our podcast is where you can watch this. Right now it's on Amazon Prime and Hulu. Those are a couple options. Go out and buy it. There's a Blu-ray with commentary on it. There's the ultraviolet. You can put it on your phone, your laptop, iPad. You don't have to carry the DVD around. I know you and I are both DVD people, which a lot of people are not. I still love buying DVDs. I still love
DVD, more so Blu-ray, but physical media reigns supreme for me. Like this could be a whole nother like episode just talking about streaming in physical media. I love streaming, but as long as I can, I'll be buying movies physically because I love having my own collection.
And the ultraviolet part that like we have the Peanut Butter Falcon, fantastic movie on DVD, and then I put it on my iTunes, and our friend hadn't seen it, so we gave her the DVD because I was like, I have a digital copy. We don't need the copy of it right now.
Exactly. Yeah. So it's smart in that regard.
Definitely check it out. I think I saw it online for pretty cheap if you want the whole collection of it. And then at the end of every episode, we're going to be talking about what we're going to watch next week, because we know that you came into this episode not knowing to watch Cabin in the Woods. So, besides probably what the title is going to tell you about it, you didn't know really to watch it. We're going to start saying at the end of next week, we're going to be watching. The audience, whoever our audience is, has a week to watch it so they can kind of interact and hear us talk about it, see if we're on the same page. And eventually we'll have guests on, we'll have people call in. So I think we're kind of torn between 2 movies for next week. We're between Uncut Gems, the brilliant Adam Sandler movie that's on Netflix now that came out last year and got robbed of the Oscars, and Sorry to Bother You, which one of my favorite actors, Lakeith Stanfield, he's in both of these. He's in Get Out. He's in just every good movie over the past 5 years. So those are going to be one of the movies. We'll probably post on social, maybe what we decide on. We'll put some teasers out there. But that's what we're deciding on. And, we really plan on getting into the commentary of these, maybe reading the screenplays of them. I highly suggest reading screenplays. I'm not a big reader. I can't read 800-page books. Screenplays you can read in a day. I bought the Get Out screenplay, and it has the alternate ending in it with images from them filming it. It has images on set, and like you can read a screenplay in a day or 2. If you want to be a screenplay writer, it's great homework, but like either way, it's a great way to kind of learn more things that weren't involved in it, or weren't kept, or kind of, I read 3 Billboards Outside Ebbing, Missouri. I read Little Miss Sunshine recently. I have Wet Hot American Summer on my queue to read. And you got to really learn what the dialogue and the kind of actions were, and what kind of the actors took, cinematographers took, editors took on. That might be a little different than that screenplay. Right.
And it's valuable. I mean, especially now where, you can find like most screenplays just right online, and
Yeah.
you can
Oh,
just
yeah,
websites that host them. So like if you really want to find one pretty quickly, you could do so.
I'm like a book guy where like if I buy a book, I also want that in paper. Like I still like CDs. That's the one thing is you buy a movie, you get a digital copy. You buy a CD, you get a digital copy. If you buy a book, you don't really always get the e version of it. But that's another thing is literally pop out, open your favorite movie on your phone and read the screenplay. It's super interesting and just really teaches you a lot about, the production and everything. Yeah.
Cool. Any kind of last minute things to say about Cabin or last thoughts?
I think it's my favorite movie. I'm still torn, but
yeah.
I think I want to watch it more. I want to watch it with the commentary. I just listen to the commentary on YouTube, but I'd like to watch it with the commentary. Yeah. I mean, it's just, and I want to get more into everything these guys have done. I mean, like I want to get into Buffy. Whedon did the movie. I remember watching the movie, which is pretty different, but Serenity and Firefly I've had on my bucket list for a long time. Alan Tudyk I know is in one of those. He's in Dale and Tucker versus Evil. But yeah, I'm just excited to see what else these guys do. And I'm excited and just more inspired by this. I mean, the world's crazy right now. I'm having a baby in a few months. I'm moving across the country in a few weeks. I'm working on finding a new job. But, I really have been enjoying writing recently. And like, I want to be inspired by these guys to write a movie in 3 days to really. And I think that shows you so much too, is if you go into writing a movie, not really having it in your head or having discussed it, it's going to take you a long time to write it. But these guys had been talking about the movie. They had the cast in mind and, they say, write what you know. So like Marty's character had been in a lot of Joss Whedon's TV shows. So like he knew how to write him into the screenplay. He knew how to really leverage him and his talents. And that's kind of a good way to write, is have people in mind and just kind of have the whole thing, all 3 acts in it set up. I mean, Drew Goddard said in an interview, he's only written 2 movies that had a 3rd act. This, and then I'm guessing the Battle at the Royale. I think that those were kind of the 2 biggest ones, because Bad Times at the El Royale, because everything else he had in mind, he didn't have that 3rd finishing act.
Yeah, that's another one we could talk about in the future. That's a unique movie. I want to see. I've only seen it once, but
I haven't seen it. It's on my list. Great cast.
Yeah, it's pretty damn good. But yeah, I mean, for me, yeah, Cabin is a personal favorite. Like nothing beats that first viewing of it. But like every time I watch it, I'm just filled with joy. Like it's both like celebrating what makes like all these horror movies great, but it's also critiquing them. It's breaking them down. It's like it's doing so much, and it does it all in an hour and a half. 90 minutes. It's able to do so much and provide this chaotic and crazy like bloodbath of an ending, which like, gets me every single time. And I love watching with people to see their reaction to it as well. But yeah, totally just like smart movie, really fun to watch, really well done. Satirical horror movie. Yeah. And I'm glad it was our first episode. Yeah. I'm glad this is the one we started off with, because it's one we both love and clearly have a lot to say about, could probably go on for a lot longer too.
Yeah.
But
some episodes will be real short if we don't have a lot. Some will be much longer if we're passionate about it. And, we're going to just cover a lot and just record as much as we can. And there's just so much content out there that will never run out. That's definitely true. And, we look forward to finding an audience, however small or big it might be. And we're going to work on the social media, a website, and just finding the right way to get a podcast out to all of these streaming platforms.
Yeah. So as of literally recording right now, we're still working on this stuff. So like, if you're watching this in the future, like we'll probably obviously have a YouTube channel. If you're watching it here, we're a Twitter, we probably have our own Twitter at Weiliotis or something like that. And yeah, clearly, we're going to have it on as many platforms as we can, Spotify, Apple being the biggest ones, but other various, hosting platforms for podcasts. You should be able to find us. And we're going to do our best to have an episode per week. And, I think in the future too, we'll get a little bit more, try to get as more interactive as we can with anyone who's following us, maybe do polls for potential movies. You maybe even help us choose what we watch and what we talk about, anything like that. We're trying to engage with our audience too. And, get feedback and critiques and everything. That's to me, that's what this is all about too. It's also about discussing said movie with other people and, getting other opinions. So That's what I really want.
Yeah.
Cool.
I don't have like a tagline or slogan or anything to we'll come up with catchphrases at some point to exit, but right now,
yeah, they'll come naturally. And
yeah,
I think for now, much respect to Ray Liotta. You're the man.
Once again, not about Ray Liotta, but we will cover him at some point.
Yes.
Yeah. So Uncut Gems or Sorry to Bother You for next week, and go watch Cabin in the Woods. If you haven't seen it and you listen to this, still go watch it. But if you've seen it years ago and you're like, oh, maybe I should revisit that, definitely revisit it. I mean, it's not even that old of a movie, but it still holds up, and it's just nothing like it. Yeah. And go watch everything else by Whedon and Goddard. I'm sure you have, because those guys are responsible for some of the best stuff of the last few decades. And we're looking forward to seeing whatever they do next.
Same here. But yeah, but thank you for listening or watching or both. I appreciate your patronage, and until next time, we'll see you soon. Bye.